Hello friends, and welcome to the Hanged Man in the Moon. If this is your first time here, welcome. Thank you for coming. I'm pleased to meet you. If you've been here before, thank you for returning. I'm truly honored. Friends, if you are a returning visitor, you know that this is my series in which I use tarot and oracle cards to explore topics related to living the intentional life. And I'd like to start with a question. How in balance do you feel like you are right now, at this moment? How important do you think balance is in your life? Now, if you're here, I'm 99.99999% sure that you are going to say that balance is important. It's part of living an intentional life. And that's true. When we think of balance, there are many areas that probably come to mind. For example, work-home balance. Yeah, the jobs that we do and the time we spend with family, we want to have a balance between those. Balance in relationships. Yeah, you and your significant other, whoever that other might be, you want to have a balance of giving and taking, of helping and receiving help. We want a balanced relationship. And those are wonderful and very important. But this week's spread, I think, is pointing us in the direction of a more fundamental kind of balance. And it's not just a physical balance of being able to stand upright, but something even more fundamental than that. So friends, we have this amazing spread already laid out. Let's take a look at it. Isn't this a beautiful spread? Unfortunately, this is the last time we're going to see these cards together in quite a while because the new moon has come and gone and I have switched out my decks. Now, if you don't know my process yet, let me give you a rundown of what I do and how these cards are still here even though the new moon has come and gone. What I do is on a Saturday night or a Sunday morning, I will do my week ahead spread, which is this. And I will take photos and I will jot down notes, and then later I will write a very quick summary of the spread. And then I'll let it sit and I'll let it simmer. And a few days later, I will arrange the photos so that I can do this video, and I will sit down, I'll set up my camera and dive into the reading. So between the time I laid the cards and now, the new moon has come and gone. That's what I'm trying to say. And this is a very interesting reading, a very deep reading. A very important for me reading, and hopefully it will have meaning for you as well. If you are new to this channel, let me give you a rundown of what you just saw. What you saw were 5 cards in the center. Yeah? Those are from an oracle deck, and they give us the theme or the thesis for this overall spread. And then around those 5 cards, which were arranged in an order of elements. I forgot to mention that. Yeah, I choose 5 cards for this spread because this oracle deck is a sacred geometry deck, and so it just seemed to lend itself naturally to a 5-element spread. Now, usually in the West we think of 4 elements, right? Fire, water, air, and earth. However, many of us also add a 5th element of ether to that, even in the West. In the East, there are 5 elements and they're different. Yeah? In the East, it's Hwa Su Mok Gum To, which is fire, water, tree or wood, metal, and earth. So they're different. In the West, we have fire, water, air, and earth, and I've added ether, which is spirit. So that's why I've done 5. And then around those 5 cards, you saw 4 groupings of other cards. At the bottom of each grouping, there was an inquiry card, a card with a question. And that question was answered by a card from 2 different tarot decks. So that's what you just saw. And if you want to see information about the decks, there will be a short clip at the end of this video that gives you that information, the name of the deck, the name of the creator, and there will be links below if you want to go and purchase these decks on your own or take a look at them more closely. Now, I don't get any money if you use those links. They're just there for your convenience. And I suggest going to look at these decks because they are beautiful decks. So I told you what the layout of the spread was, and I told you about the links. So let's dive right into the oracle section of the spread, the thesis statement. Let's take a look. Those were the 5 oracle cards of the introductory paragraph for this essay of a spread. And I'm just going to warn you ahead of time that I am rereading these cards afresh right now, even more so than I usually do. I mean, I always, when I record the video, am reading them as if I'm seeing them for the first time, even though I've been sitting with them for quite a while. But some energies, some feelings have arisen in the last 24 hours, which have made me want to reconsider this spread. And I haven't really mapped it out quite as neatly as I often do. So I'm really going into this a little bit more blindly than I have in the past. So come on the journey with me as I feel my way around in the dark. So we've got 5 cards. The central card was the card of ether, which is the card of spirit, of the non-physical. And lower left we have fire, upper right we have water, upper left we had air, and bottom left we have earth. And I'm going to read them beginning from earth and spiral around back to ether, which is the way I've been reading this spread of these cards from this deck. And we begin with the earth card, the physical, the material card, the material girl, which was together, balance. And you saw a figure. There were 2 triangles in the background with circles around the points of each one of the triangles, of each one of the triangles. Yes, of each of the triangles. And there were 2 human figures overlaid in front of that. There was a male presenting figure and a female presenting figure, which makes sense. Yeah, we've got perhaps a fire, water, air, earth symbol combined in the background, and then on top of that we've got male and female. In the binary world, that those together give us the idea of balance, right? So this card is here to remind us to seek both inner and outer balance. The balance of, and the deck says opposing aspects, but I would prefer to refer to them not as opposing, but as directional, as spectrum, as directions of a line. Not in opposition in the sense of they're in conflict, but in going in other directions that are on a fuller spectrum, if that makes sense. And I think perhaps for modern people considering the ideas of gender, we're realizing more that the idea of masculine and feminine, they're not a dichotomy, they're not binary, they're part of a full spectrum of I don't even want to call it identity anymore, because we don't, identifying with a gender is, I think, against the nature of spirit, the nature of who we are. We don't identify with a gender, we express gender in various degrees and in various directions of the spectrum. And that expression can fall in different places at any given point of any given day. I can be presenting myself in a more classically masculine direction at one point, and then move into a more classically feminine direction at another point, and then fall somewhere in the middle at another point of the day. I don't want to, personally, I believe, I don't want to identify with a gender, because the purpose of living, or the realization we have in living an intentional life, is that these binary opposites can be tools for describing things, but we don't want to identify things in the binary anymore. We don't want to identify ourselves with any one thing in particular, because as soon as we do that, we limit ourselves. We block ourselves off from a lot of our potential. From our potential for self-actualization, in fact. Because the actualized self is all of that. The actualized self has that full spectrum of every way of expressing self. Going back to gender, a fully actualized self has all of that masculine, feminine, non-parts stuff inside, and as the potential for expressing. Does that make any sense? Analytical, non-analytical, analytical, intuitive is a spectrum. And an actualized person has access to all of that in both directions, and those are not necessarily in opposition. So I don't want to say that we're seeking to balance opposing forces, because they don't have to be opposing in the sense of in conflict. They're parts of a spectrum, directions on a spectrum, in balance. Because if we lean too far in one direction for too long, we get out of balance. And if you think of the yang in Korean, or in Chinese, yin-yang, that Taoist symbol of the dark and the light, paisley-shaped things in a circle, you'll notice that in the light part, there is a dark circle. In the dark part, there is a light circle, kind of looking like eyes, which reminds us that in that dynamic balance, the light isn't only light, it is light and dark. The dark isn't only dark, it is dark and light. And that balance is dynamic and moves and swirls. And that's the balance we're after. We want to balance our relationships with people as well. We want to balance our internal world and the way that we experience and express ourselves. We also want to balance our relationships with others. And that's also part of this card. Yeah? Because we are co-creators of this universe. We are co-creators of our experience of this physical universe. And our relationships in this physical universe are important. They are part of our experience, are the fullness of our experience. And so balance with the other asks us to consider, how much respect are we presenting, are we holding the other with? How much understanding are we holding the other with? A balanced relationship is a relationship of respect, love, and understanding. Sharing joy. Sharing love. Sharing well-being. Sharing awareness. And if there are inequalities, and because we are people in physical bodies in a physical universe, there is bound to be some inequality, some unbalance, some misunderstanding. And allowing that to exist, allowing ourselves to recognize the misunderstandings, recognize the iniquities that exist within our relationships, whether they be gargantuan or minuscule, recognizing them, allowing ourselves to recognize them without blame, without self-flagellation or flagellation of the other. Recognizing them and then moving to return to a balance, return to understanding, to allow the misunderstanding to unravel itself into understanding. Because living in balance is living in joy, is living in love. And living in balance and living in love together allows us to expand. It allows us to grow and enhance who we are and to more fully actualize ourselves, to more fully, as Jung would say, individuate, which is not an action of separation, of being other than somebody else, but of becoming more fully who we are. And that's always a relational thing, right? I am fully myself in relationship with other, because that's what all of this is. This is all a unity. This is all a oneness. And that's the direction we're going to be going in. But we start here in recognition of other, and recognition of balance, and recognition of spectrum, and finding balance within that spectrum, and opening to understanding, and opening to respect, and opening to perceiving the imbalances and the misunderstandings and the iniquities that do exist in all of our relationships, and moving to solve, to allow them to solve, to be the solution to them. Yes, to be the solution to them. And to not force, not make, not require the other to be the solution, but to inspire the other to become the mutual solution. And we move from this understanding of the desire for balance and recognition of iniquities and imbalances and misunderstandings. We move into the air portion of this. And you'll notice in the air, and you'll notice in the water, air is generally considered an active, classically Western male suit. And the water is a classically Western female, suit, I'm thinking Tarot, element. Water is receptive, air is active. It pushes out and water receives. So, if we're going to, for a moment, put ourselves in the binary, just as an experiment, as a thought experiment, you will notice that in the masculine air, we're going to move into the feminine water. And in the feminine water, we're going to move into the masculine air. We've got an interesting balance here as well. So, the air place of this spread gave us the octagon. You saw two octagons, right? We saw just a plain old octagon, big octagon at the bottom, and a smaller one at the top. And that smaller one looked like it was drawn using circles. Yeah, it was like an octagon was built or constructed out of circles overlapping and butting up against each other. And circles we usually think of as more feminine, and the squarish shapes more masculine. And again, we're just going into the binary as a thought experiment now with this spread. That's not saying that all women are round and all men are square. That's not what we're saying. Now we're just going into this with our feelers to explore what this split of a potential spectrum might be teaching us. And so, in the air suit, in the more male masculine side, we have an octagon, which is the shape of nourishment, of the mother goddess. So in the suit of air, we had a card representing mother goddess and nourishment. Interesting. And this card is here to remind us that success and nourishment are available to us. And we often think of that as a very watery kind of thing, of the nourishment. But here it's in the air, in the suit of air, in the space for air. This card is also a card of reminding us that there are periodic periods of renewal. And also that we are nourished and we nourish others. This is all in the area of mind, of communication. And a lot of times we think of our communication and our mind as being these logical tools, these tools of thought, of consciousness, but it's egoic consciousness a lot of the time. And here in that area, we're introducing the more watery nature of the mother goddess, of nourishing ourselves and others with our thoughts. That we want to balance our thoughts. And a lot of the time, especially in tarot, we think of our thoughts as being very aggressive, sometimes violent. Yeah? In tarot, our thoughts, the air suit is usually the suit of swords. We don't usually think of swords as being very nourishing, but rather aggressive and on the attack. But here in air, we're asking ourselves to introduce water, nurturing, nourishment, cycles, like cycles of the moon. Recognizing that there are times when our thoughts are going to be darker and lighter. There are going to be times when our thoughts are active or passive. There are times when our thoughts can be directed to nourish ourselves and others. That our communication to ourselves can be nourishing, and that we want to nourish others with our communication. And perhaps that is the direction we want to be sure that we are directing our thinking, our thoughts, and our communication, rather than taking down and criticizing and dissecting. We want to use our communication and our thought as an integrating tool. And if we do that, we somehow come back into a balance, right? And then here we move into the water suit. And in the water suit, in this spot for water, the emotions, the unconscious, we have the square, which in this deck is Earth. Interesting, because Earth we usually think in tarot as being the feminine element. Water and Earth are considered the feminine, female elements, whereas wands and swords are the male, more active of the suits. But here, Earth is considered male. And I can see another way of perceiving Earth as being male, as being solid, as being square, as being hard, whereas water is soft. I can wrap my head around that, can you? As Earth, as this material stuff, as being more male, masculine. In this forced dichotomy, which is not the truth of experience. But in this forced dichotomy, for our exploration, we're going to put Earth in the male category. And we're putting that in with water. So how does that work? So we want a secure place to explore our emotions. We want a safe place to explore our feelings, to explore what are the intentions that arise from our feelings. We want a safe space to explore the thoughts that arise from our feelings. We want a safe space to be able to speak our emotions, to speak our intentions. And remember, we imagine intention to be this current, this river flowing forward. So a very watery thing, right? Very energetic and watery thing. And we want a safe space to communicate our intentions. We want to feel the solidity of unconditional love. Unconditional love feels very safe, doesn't it? Feels very secure. And that's the squareness of love that we are seeking. That security, that stability. We also want our ability to speak our personal truth and speak it firmly and speak it with authority and with strength. And that's, again, that balance of the structured and the soft. The security of the emotion, or the emotion within the security of the form, of the square. We want to find security in enough to be able to express ourselves safely, with courage, not aggressively, not in the desire to attack the other. We don't want to use our emotions as a weapon, right? But we want to have the security to express ourselves and know that we have the right. We are worthy to express ourselves. And that security is part of this boxy square. That's not going to wobble or move around. It's going to keep us, it's a platform from which we can speak, from which we can communicate, from which we can explore with thought. And so we had that balance, right? We've got in the air section, the desire to nourish, with our communication to other and to self. The recognition that in all of our thoughts, in all of our consciousness, that there are cycles. And then in our watery, emotional, unconscious side, we want to find a secure structure within which we can feel safe to express ourselves, to explore ourselves as well. And then both of these the softness in the air, the structure in the water. They merge together into the circle in the fire. Now, in our fire suit, we had the circle, wholeness, potential, unity, the oneness of all. That started from the oneness of the monad, of the divine spark that began all of this that we were experiencing. The circle, wholeness, potential. Also expansion, right? A circle can very easily expand. Ever growing, ever expanding potential. That's what this is. This universe is. This non-physical is. The fire that we have is not a line. It's not a square. It's not a wave. It's a circle that expands and grows and expresses its potential. This fire is here to remind us that we can experience our divine nature as part of this universe. And it's very interesting that this card came up in the fire section, because I don't know if you've ever explored this idea or heard of these ideas, but that this universe is a holographic universe, that we are individually fractals of the whole. And those are two terms that ask for some explanation. A fractal. I don't know if you've ever seen this image, but there's a fractal. A fractal is an equation that produces an irregular shape that the more you zoom into any one part of it, you zoom in and you realize that the entire shape reveals itself again within that part. And then you zoom into that same part of that new revelation of the shape, and you come across another expanding, same shape. That is a fractal. So the farther in you dive into this pattern, you realize that each part contains the entire figure. And the more you zoom out, you realize you've zoomed out and that you're looking at a part that expands to become the same figure again. I'll put a link to a YouTube explanation or a YouTube demonstration of a fractal. Also, the holographic universe, a hologram, has aspects of the entirety of the image in every little piece of the image. If you were to break a hologram into pieces, each piece would have aspects of the whole within it. So, each one of us, as expressions of the divine in this physical universe, each one of us is a hologram, not a literal hologram, but is holographic of the entirety of the divine. We have aspects of the entirety of the divine as our makeup, expressing with each of these beautiful physical bodies that we are co-creating. We are also, each one of us, a fractal of the entirety of the divine. And if you were to dive into aspects of each one of us, each one of those aspects would again be a fractal, a holograph of the entirety of the divine and the entirety of ourselves. And because of that, as we experience ourselves fully, we are also experiencing the divine. And as the divine bursts forth as this physical universe, each part of this physical universe is an expression of the fullness of the divine. So that means you, me, the devices that we're using to record and play this back, all of this. And that's part of that first burst of fire, which creates this universe. And that we create our intentions with. Now, we create our intentions with these bursts of fire, of not intuition, what's the word? Of inspiration. Yeah, the fire of inspiration creates our intentions that we set on the river of our intentions, and then we open and move towards them. So we create our intentions that become our reality. We create form and meaning from ourselves. Because those intentions we create and that we move toward are creations of self. We create the self who will have that experience before it actually manifests. That's part of our evolution, right? We evolve into the one who has the experience that we want to have. And that's part of this fire suit. And that's part of the balance of putting water in air and air in water, putting structure in our emotions and our unconscious, and putting softness and flow and cycles into the more rigidness of air. I mean, usually we don't think of air as being rigid, but in this scenario, air is more rigid. It's more aggressive. We put softness into the aggressiveness, and we put a little bit of firmness into our soft. And from that balance, we can experience our wholeness and the fullness of our potential, which allows us to open to create in the universe. And from this, we move into the ether, into spirit. And in this place, we have the icosahedron. Now, I don't know if you remember this, but the first card, the card of balance, had those two triangles and the humans, and those, if you connected the points of those triangles and formed an outline, that outline and the outline of this icosahedron are the same. They are the same. You could overlap them and you would have the same outline. And I think that is beautiful, because it is that ether that is manifesting here in these physical bodies that we have in this physical universe and as this physical universe. So this icosahedron, which is an image of the earthly material manifestation, and the earthly material manifestation, which is an image of this icosahedron, of the ether. The icosahedron is the card of perspective, which is perfect, right? It's all about perspective. And the perspective that this card is here to remind us of is that perhaps the subject that we are considering right now has been on our minds for a long time, and we've not made much progress with it. Not that we've made no progress, but we've made a certain amount of progress, and we've run into a plateau. If we think of progress doing this, we've run into a plateau. We keep moving forward, but not gaining any evolution of our answer to the question at hand, which is, how do I live my life more intentionally? This card is reminding us that we may have reached a plateau of growth in understanding. Why? Why would that happen? It could be happening because We're thinking too much. We have gone out of balance. We have shifted too far into one side of the spectrum of ways of perceiving and contemplating and understanding things. We've gotten too rational, perhaps. And so this card is reminding us to seek a new perspective, inner guidance, to allow the receptive mind to inform our perspective and clear away the blocked thoughts and thought patterns that we've accumulated. If we have reached any age above majority, above 18 to 21, if we've reached an age beyond that, we've accumulated a lot of stuff. And some of it is helpful, certainly, but not all of it. And there are times when we want to recognize that a lot of that stuff we've accumulated is blocking our view. The beliefs, the ideas, the thought patterns, the habits of thought, the negative thought patterns as well, but some of the positive ones too. That I am good at this. Period. End of story. Nothing else. Just this. Sometimes those good things limit our view, our perspective, our potential for seeing other possibilities. I understand this, and so I'm happy with my understanding of this. Limits our potential for understanding more in many ways, and at many times. So this card is here to remind us to recognize when we've hit a plateau, and not to curse the plateau, not to condemn the plateau, not to condemn ourselves for reaching the plateau, but rather to find a way to balance our perception, and to balance our perception for most of us humans in these human bodies. That means to open ourselves to a different way of perceiving and a different way of understanding. And I'm reminded of I think it's an essay by Aldous Huxley, The Doors of Perception. If the doors of perception were clean, what would I perceive? What amazing, what wondrousness would I perceive? That's not a quote, that's my interpretation of what he said. That's not a quote. But we want to clear the doors of our perception. We want to wipe away a lot of the stuff that we have accumulated on our senses, our actual physical senses, also our sixth sense. We want to be able to open ourselves up to receive information. Instead of going out and searching for it, to receive it. And some of that could be intuitive. Some of it could be allowing ourselves to receive the wisdom that exists here. And I'm pointing deliberately to here, because the unconscious mind is not only here, it's here. It's the entirety of the nervous system as well. And it's here, and it's here, and it's here. To open to that. But also we might want to open to a different kind of unconscious perception. Intuition is wonderful. Intuition is gathering or observing information, and without dissecting and putting it together in different ways and analyzing it, but rather seeing the whole and understanding understanding what it is, understanding what we're seeing. Like, instead of When we look at a map, we look at each road and we analyze which direction we want to go in, but rather we look at the whole map, and the path we want to take appears as an obvious path. Without analysis, it just is obvious. It's there. That's intuition. And that's a wonderful way of being open to receiving knowledge. But there's another way of receiving knowledge from a deeper level of our unconscious, from the self, from the eternalness that we are as we emanate, as we become these human bodies, yes, but also from below, from the depths, from the self. And we might not be able to fully open ourselves to the self because that could be shattering, but we can still receive information, we can still receive wisdom from the self, from the archetypes, as Jung might put them, that reside within our unconscious. From our, if you have lived primarily as a male figure, from our anima. If you've lived primarily as a female figure, from our animus. From our shadow. From all of the pieces of ourselves and the elements of ourselves that reside within the unconscious. We can receive wisdom from there. And that's usually the area where we're least open. Because we are so trained to think rationally, to perceive rationally, to communicate rationally, which is a wonderful thing. But out of balance, we close ourselves off from our potential. And so this entire spread is reminding us to find balance with other and with ourselves. To balance the elements of air and water, earth and fire, thought and emotion, conscious and unconscious. To discover the wholeness when we are in balance, and then open to the way of perceiving that we usually do not take advantage of. And if we can do that even sometimes, we will be flowing fiercely with the power of our intention. And I use fierce in the sense of Project Runway. We will be fierce. We will be fully ourselves and unashamedly expressing who we are, not in opposition to anyone or anything, but just in the security and the fullness of ourselves, that earth in water, that male in the female, and the female in the male. And we'll be fierce in our individuation and our self-actualization. And living from that fullness, can you imagine how powerful we would be? We are. Can you imagine how powerful you are now? I think that's really the point. You are powerful. You are power-filled. Powerful. Power-filled. I am power-filled. Just want to recognize it. Be open to it. That seems like a really easy thing to say, but it asks a lot of us to be able to do that. And we can. We certainly can. You can. I can. Those we love can. And that's really what balance is. And it's a dynamic balance. So, we've just wound our way around to the point of this, of opening to the fullness of self. And the way to open to the fullness of self is by first finding our balance, finding our security, finding our way to nurture and nourish ourselves and others, and to feel secure to express and to explore. And then realizing the integration that we are, and that we are fractals, that we are a hologram of the fullness of this universe and the divine that encompasses all of that. And as we recognize that, then we're safe and able to open to the fullness of self. We've got 4 questions to ask of this spread. Let's see where those questions lead us. I've got to tell you, I'm a little bit dizzy after reading that central part of the spread. Maybe there was a lot of energy flowing through me. I don't know. But, so here I am. I'm back. And asking the first question, which you just saw, which was, how can I be more flexible? And maybe that's it. Maybe that's the reason I'm feeling a little bit dizzy, is because I'm not quite as flexible as I want to be. So how can I be more flexible? How can you be more flexible? We have 2 answers to this question. And you saw that they are both cups. Perfect, right? We've got 2 cups answering the question of how can I be more flexible? Water. Water is ultimately the perfection of flexibility, if you ask me. Air isn't so flexible. It's too diffuse to be, it's not cohesive enough to be flexible, if that makes sense. It's just everywhere. Water is, unless it's a vapor, water in its liquid form, which, well, we don't, so in its vapor form, it's gas, it's steam. In solid form, it's ice, but here we're thinking water, which means it's in liquid form. You can see it, you can touch it, you can feel it, it's a thing, yeah? But it's also exquisitely flexible. And so how can I be more flexible? We've got 2 answers, the 6 of Cups and the King of Cups. And in the 6 of Cups, different from Pamela Coleman Smith's art, which is 2 small diminutive figures. We could see them as children, but they're not necessarily children. 2 diminutive figures with 5 cups with flowers, and one of the figures is holding a cup to another one of the figures. They're standing outside. There's a house in the background. Looks like there's a larger figure in the background as well, a human figure, a human person in shadow. And this is, in this card, what do we see? We see what looks like an adult and a child. And the adult-looking person is leaning over and patting the child's head, a very nurturing childhood kind of memory feel to this card, right? We've got 3 cups above, 3 cups below. This is the card of nostalgia. It's a card of childhood reminiscence, memories, innocence and joy. Childlike innocence, childlike joy, just being excited about being and being wherever we are, whether we're in the middle of a garden of flowers or in the middle of a field of mud and playing with that. And the joy of just being and experiencing and manipulating and exploring and just being. So, I don't think this card is here to teach us, is to tell us that to be more flexible, we've got to focus more on the past. We got to think of the good old days. I don't think that's what this is. To reminisce about, remember when things were nice. Remember when things were good. Remember when people were kind. None of that. That's not going to make us more flexible. That's going to actually make us more rigid. Because we'll be comparing then and now, and, well, these people aren't kind. This isn't nice. It's not as good as it was when I was some age. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 50 years ago. So I think this card is here to tell us, like this larger figure is interacting with the smaller figure, of kindness for one, gentleness, but also innocence. It's our innocence and joy that allows us to be more flexible. It's our being critical and judgmental that makes us rigid, right? I fall into that quite often. Innocence, joy, in the now. Not remembering when the good old days when, but in the now is the first step, perhaps, to becoming more flexible. Regaining that childlike understanding, that childlike experience of life. Being happy wherever we are, doing whatever we're doing. And sure, yeah, children also are unhappy where they are and doing what they are doing and throw a fit. But not always. And maybe we also want to be flexible enough to allow ourselves to throw our fits and be unhappy with where we are. I don't know about you, but I find myself judging myself a lot when I do that. When I'm unhappy with what is, when I find myself displeased, dissatisfied, and irritated with the way things are going, I find myself also judging myself for having those thoughts and feelings, and then the negativity grows from there. Have you ever experienced that? What if we were able to receive those inner or expressed temper tantrums within ourselves? What if we were to receive them instead of resisting them? And instead of acting them out in the world, holding them in our love, holding our temper tantruming selves in our arms of love and acceptance, and more than acceptance, of loving embrace. Not the embrace of preventing someone from acting, but the embrace of love, of well-being and joy, of yes, you are, I am. I wish we could be taught that in school. But I think that's something that I am learning now, and we can all learn the way to be innocent and joyful in the moment, and also allow our negative reactions, our reactions of no, our terrible twos, which they don't rear up their ugly heads, that's what I was about to say, which appear in our experience. And if we can do that, how much more flexible we would be. And then this, right next to the King of Cups. And in this King of Cups, he's not a seated king on a throne in the middle of the ocean like in Pamela Coleman Smith's drawing, but this king kind of looks a little bit like a pirate to me. Anyways, this king is dressed in maybe 17th, 16th, 17th century French garb with a beautiful chapeau and these large sleeves and below, and knickers and hose and boots, and below this king's feet there is water, and it's not this calm water, it's water, a large amount of water that's flowing down and flowing up on either side of the king. In the middle of a forest, it looks like. But anyways, we got this water that is surrounding the king. And this is the king of the emotionally balanced one, the compassionate one, the diplomatic and caring one. So, to be more flexible, first, I intend for myself to be my childlike self and enjoy and the experience that I'm having now wherever I am, and allowing myself to embrace the resistant self that sometimes appears. And also, in that dichotomy, in that spectrum, finding my balance, which is the King of Cups. Finding my own balance in that, the watery, in turbulence, the ups and downs of our lives. Being compassionate with self and also being compassionate with other. Being diplomatic when we are experiencing the terrible twos within ourselves. Also being able to be diplomatic when those experiences are here, rather than projecting them out on the other. Being able to be diplomatic as we experience the tantrum inside. Being able to care for ourselves and the other as well. That's the king. So I'm able to be myself and care for myself and allow myself as I allow and care for others. And as I do that, I become flexible. I become much more flexible. Yes. How can I be more flexible? I can be the fullness of my water. My childlike childish childness and my mature, wise, watery self. So, we've got a second question, moving in a different direction. Let's look at that. This second question, how am I willing to change? And in this card, or in this section, for these answers, for these two answers, we have fire. Now we just had water answering the first question. Here we have two fire cards answering the second. First card, Queen of Wands. Now it's interesting. The King of Cups is for me, it's the fire of water. Some people would say the air of water. For me, the kings are fire. Fire of water. Queens are water. Almost everybody agrees on that. All queens are water. All kings are fire. All knights are air. All pages are earth. I mean, that's one way to order the ranks of the suits. And some people switch out the king and the knight so that the kings are air and the knights are fire. But for me, it's the other way around. The king is fire, the queen is water, the knight is air, and the page is earth. So the Queen of Wands is the water of fire. The King of Cups is the fire of water. So those two here answering different questions, but in balance, I think is just amazing. And that we've got a set of cards from water answering one and a set of cards for fire answering the other is also amazing. So, okay, Queen of Wands, right? Here we have a very regal looking queen sitting. She's got a huge wand behind her. It would be her left shoulder, I suppose. It looks like it's on the right for us. The card of courage. Confidence, independence, self-assuredness, and determination. This queen is able to do whatever she wants to do. She's also practical and down to earth. For the wand suits, yeah? She's not earthy, But she is down to earth. She is practical. She knows she can do what she wants to do, and she knows the way to do it. She can also be the nurturing one of fire. She can mentor others in their passions, in their creativity. Now, she's got her own, but she also mentors those of the people around her. So how am I willing to change? I'm willing to become more the Queen of Wands. I'm willing to become more independent, more courageous, more confident, more self-assured, and more able to inspire those qualities and the creativity in others. My water of fieriness. And then right next to the Queen of Wands, we got the Page of Wands, the Earth of Fire, which is the card of inspiration and ideas. It's a card of discovery and limitless potential. It's the card of the potential of the fire suit. Free spirit, energetic, motivated, inspired action, motivated to do something. Do something. Almost anything, but to do something. It's the newbie who wants to get out there and do something. And this Page of Wands, in balance with the Queen of Wands, I think is a beautiful answer to this, how am I willing to change? Because a lot of us, most of us, will express one side or the other of these two. I'm more pagey, I'm more queeny. In many ways, more ways than one perhaps. But I'm more queeny, I'm more pagey. And we want both. We want to be inspired, fresh, new, and confident, secure, practical. And we can be both, we can balance both, we can combine both and integrate both into our lives. Just as with our emotions, we want it to be the childlike one and the mature one. Here, we want to be the fresh, inspired, excited, limitless potential one, and also the practical, confident, courageous. I know how to do it. And sometimes I'll be more in the wow and more in the I got this side of the ends of the spectrum. But we want to balance those ends, those directions of the spectrum. Because there's no end, right? There is no end. And we're always evolving. So if we had imagined an end to this spectrum, we're going to move past that. And then what would be there? No, these spectrums, there's no ends to the spectrum. They're just directions of the spectrum that go on to infinity. Now there's the queen end that goes this way, and there's the page end that goes this way onto infinity, and we're expanding to encompass both sides, both directions. So that's how I'm willing to change. I'm willing to evolve in my passions, to express and be both of those directions of the spectrum. So we've got a third question. Let's go there. It was just wonderful to have those two balancing sets of cards for the first two questions. Now for the next two questions, we don't have that same kind of balance. But we do have something. So let's look at what we do have. What am I attracted to? Here we have the Three of Wands and the Ace of Pentacles. We have fire and earth. So we got a balance there. Yeah, a 3 and a 1, which is good. The Three of Wands. Usually we see some male or figure, could be female, could be non-binary, but a figure standing up on the top of some kind of a platform, perhaps a roof, holding one rod and looking out into the water. There's a ship either coming or going, and it's this card of expansion, of foresight, of productivity, of progress, of having had that idea in the Ace of Wands, and then having explored it in the Two of Wands, and now actually doing something, taking the first step in the Three. In this card, we've got a figure, we've seen this card before. We've got this figure out in what looks like a pasture, holding this very comparatively large flower in their hands, and behind her, a cow, a white cow, which also is, compared to the flower, pretty small, but about the same relative size with the human figure. Out in the field, I would see this as having seen the newer pasture and moving in that direction, making progress. Yeah, it can be the adventurous course. This card doesn't look very adventurous, but adventurous course, taking action from inspiration, from intention. So, what am I attracted to? I'm attracted to that. I'm attracted to the entire spectrum of my passions, of course, but I'm really attracted to that adventurous course of taking the first step, of going in the direction of moving to the manifestation of my creation, of creating something in the universe, of expressing my passions, expressing my sexuality as well, expressing my fire in the world. And then right next to this Three of Wands card, we got the Ace of Pentacles. And in this Ace of Pentacles, instead of a hand offering this disembodied and mystical hand offering this coin in the middle of the sky, in front of a garden with a path leading out to the mountains, in Pamela Coleman Smith's art, what do we have here? We have what looks like a caterpillar of sorts, I guess, standing up or reaching up with this large thing on the back of their head and neck. This thing which could be perhaps a seed, which could be, I don't know, a gem, could be, I don't know. It's a thing, it's a material thing that's shiny, a new shiny object. We like those things, right? We like those shiny objects, all of us magpies and squirrels. Woo, shiny. So, the Ace of Pentacles, it's the new opportunity. Manifestation, abundance, but the seed of abundance, the seed of manifestation. It's all there, but it will require nurturing, and it will require planting and watering and maintenance. It'll require being grown, but it's there. It's all there to manifest. And it can be an offer, it could be an investment, and I'm attracted to those things. I mean, what am I attracted to? I'm attracted to being offered stuff, sure. I'm attracted to investments that grow, sure. But probably I'm more attracted to new opportunities and manifestations and the beginnings of abundance. Fullness of abundance is great, but that can get boring if it doesn't continue abundancing, right? But that first beginning of abundance is enticing, it's titillating, it's exciting, it's delicious. So I'm attracted to that. I'm attracted to seeing where I want to go and beginning to move in that direction and experiencing new opportunities and new manifestations and the beginnings of abundance and the beginnings of recognition of the abundance that is here and that is evolving. I'm attracted to all of that. That makes perfect sense, right? Are you attracted to those things? Well, just wait for this fourth question because it's a doozy. Let's look at it. This fourth question is difficult. Not the question. Actually, the question is fine. How can I express myself? That's fine. I could we can run with that in many different directions. The question is fine. It's a wonderful question. It's a good question to ask ourselves. However, the answers to this question are what make it a little difficult. So let's do a quick review. What have we gotten? How have we gotten here? And we started with wanting balance. Balancing relationships, balancing self, balancing aspects of self, balancing directions of spectrums. And so we looked at two ways of balancing, right? We looked at the nourishment of our communication, the feeling of success through our communication and through our ideas and our thoughts. And recognizing that there will be cycles and there will be periods of highs and lows and lefts and rights and all of that in our conscious sphere, and accepting and being with all of that. And then we moved into the watery side and wanting structure for our water, wanting a good container that makes us feel safe, stable and safe to express our emotions, to dive into our emotions, to feel the fullness of our emotions and our unconscious, and to be secure in our self-expression. And then we moved into, from there, these two kinds of balance into the wholeness, recognizing the wholeness that we are, and that we are fractals, that we are holograms of the totality of the oneness of the divine and the non-physical and the physical. And from that recognition of the fullness and oneness of all that we are in our balance, we moved into recognizing that, okay, we may want to see how balanced our perception is and where we're gaining our wisdom and our knowledge. And perhaps along with our contemplation and our meditation and our rumination, we also want to open ourselves to the depths of who we are and the heights of who we are, and finding other ways beyond intuition to be receptive to wisdom and knowledge. And the more open we are to all ways of receiving and exploring information and wisdom and knowledge, the more open we are to the powerful flow of intention. And so we moved into, how can I be more flexible? I can be more flexible in my emotions. I can have that childlikeness and my maturity of emotion as well, in the Six of Cups and the King of Cups. And how am I willing to change? Well, I'm willing to change in how I manipulate my fire, how I work with my fire. I'm going to be courageous, independent, and also nurturing of others, and be the model or the inspirer of fire in others, as well as being the newbie and explorer and excited and discovery of passions and sexuality and all of that. That's how I want to change. Have those aspects all beautifully integrated and in balance. So what am I attracted to? As I am open, I'm attracted to finding my course and moving towards what I want, and also getting new opportunities. And all of these things are wonderful. And we recognize that there are cycles, and these are all wonderful things. And then how can I express myself? We've got the Wheel of Fortune and the Nine of Swords. Ouch. Ouch. And actually, I've used this Nine of Swords. No, I haven't. No, I haven't. I was tempted to use this Nine of Swords as my question for my smaller weekly reading that uses the Tarot de Marseille, 3 cards from Tarot de Marseille, or an antique Italian deck. And I was going to use the Nine of Swords, but I remember now I decided not to. And I have not done that spread yet. But this Nine of Swords coming up has been a spur in my side, has been a something I'm still in the middle of integrating. So let me see if I can do this with you. Let's see where I get with you. How can I express myself? Well, first card is the Wheel of Fortune. And in this card, we get the wheel. it kind of looks like a wheel of the year. We've got a figure, female-looking figure, sitting in front of the wheel with another circle wheel in their hands. With lovely white gown. The Wheel of Fortune can be good luck. It can be the cycle of karma. Now, every action creates a reaction, that cycle of karma. I do, so something happens. I act in the world, and then the world reacts. And I feel that reaction within my life. It can be life cycles. Both the big cycle of birth, growth, and death, to smaller cycles, monthly cycles within our lives. Daily cycles of waking up and being active and then going to sleep. It could be all of those cycles. Could be, I don't believe in destiny. There, it's out. I don't believe in destiny, but this card can be destiny, kismet. It can also be serendipity, synchronicity, things that happen congruently that inform our lives sometimes. So how can I express myself with the Wheel of Fortune? Especially as it relates to the Nine of Swords. And usually in the Nine of Swords, we see a figure waking up perhaps from a nightmare in the night. And there are 9 swords above the person on the wall. That's the card of nightmares, of worry, fear, anxiety. It's the card of, can be depression, can be insomnia, could be a troubled sleep, troubled mind, grieving, feeling haunted by the past. So how can I express myself? Well, I'm going to express all of my worry, fear, and anxiety and nightmares out into the world. I don't think that's what this is trying to say. But you'll also notice that in this card, there's a figure seated on the ground, head and face in hands. Like, oh no, I'm sorry. The hands were here, right? Like this. And then there's this creature, this bug, arched up and over their heads. And there are the 9 arrows on the ground pointing towards the figure on the ground, seated. And again, this creature, this bug-like insect creature, arching over the top of the head of the seated humanoid figure. Looking a little bit like the Wheel of Fortune, right? Looking a little bit like that wheel. So these 2 cards coming up together, I think are here to remind us that even though when we're in the midst of those anxieties, worries, fears, nightmares, that we're just in one part of the cycle. That the wheel of our experience in the world and our perception of the world is turning. Like the octagon from the oracle portion of the spread, the oracle portion, that our thoughts, there are periods. Our thoughts are periodic, that there are highs and lows, that there are lefts and rights, that there are cycles to our thought processes as well. And sometimes we're worried and sometimes we're not. Perhaps this card is here to remind us of those cycles, of these 2 cards together are here to remind us that, yes, there are going to be times when we are feeling anxiety, worry, fear, maybe depression, that maybe we're not sleeping so well. But that's one part of a cycle, and that we will come out of it because of the Wheel of Fortune because of the cycles of all aspects of our lives. If we allow ourselves. Now, it is entirely possible for us to resist the wheel of the cycle of our thoughts and keep ourselves buried in our anxiety. It is absolutely possible to do that. It is possible. However, we do that, I think, because we forget that it's part of a cycle. We get so entrenched and enmeshed in these thoughts of, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy enough, I don't do this well enough, these horrible things are coming, that horrible thing is coming, I see all these horrible things around me and they're going to come and get me. We forget that that's part of a cycle. That we can allow ourselves to rise up from if we allow ourselves to rise up from them. That there is a natural rise out of that if we are open to that. And how can I express myself? Perhaps I can express myself by reminding myself that this too shall pass, as they say. I think that's from the book of Solomon the Wise, maybe from the Bible, but this too shall pass. If I'm wrong, let me know in the comments below. But this too shall pass. These anxieties shall pass. These nightmares shall pass. So first, I can express myself, to allow myself to move through the trauma that I'm probably inflicting upon myself. That I can allow myself to naturally rise out of it when the time is right. Because you'll notice that there's no hand crank on this wheel of fortune. We can't grab it and make it go faster, or we can't make it turn to our ego's rigid desires of how it thinks things should be. It's not the ego who has the hand on the wheel. The wheel turns by the movement of the ether of our spirit. And so, we can open to our movement back up out of anxiety and fear and grief and depression and worry. And maybe we want somebody to help us move, to help us open, to help us allow ourselves to rise up from that. And that's a wonderful thing too. That is a wonderful thing. Getting help to move beyond, to open to the movement of the wheel is a wonderful thing. And not being afraid of when we do dip back into it. When we do dip back into nervousness or anxiety or worry. Not being afraid of that. Getting help to be able to navigate the movement of the wheel is a wonderful thing. And we want to express to ourselves that we can do this, and we can get help doing this. And then when we're back up on the other side, then we want to express more out. Not saying that we want to hide away from others, that we want to pretend like we're not in the middle of anxiety or worry or fear and not let other people know. That's not what I'm saying. Well, I am saying we don't want to lay all of that on the other person. We don't want to project all of that on people around us. We'll let them know what our experience is at this moment, yes. Especially people we trust and who we love and who love us back. We want to let them know that right now I am in this. And I right now may not have as much to give you right now. And I'm open to receiving from you. Because that's the balanced relationship, right? That's a relationship of respect, of equity. That equity and respect that we got in the first card of the Oracle spread, of the together and balance. Yeah, we want to open to and express ourselves in that way that, yes, right now I am here. It's not your fault. It's not because of you. But I am here right now, and I am open to you as much as I can, but I am right now only able to give as much as I can. And if I'm not giving as much as I have in the past right now, it's not because I do not love you. I love you. And it's because I love you that I'm telling you. That's a relationship of respect, right? And then we're able to move out. And then if we're open to moving back into these times, as long as we're not trying to, if we're not resisting the turning of the wheel, which will sometimes dip into this not wanted, if we're not resisting that, then it won't perhaps dip quite as deeply the next time we dips down into that. Perhaps the turning of the wheel will rise and we'll only dip briefly and less deeply into that other side of the wheel. Not wanting to reject that side. We don't want to reject those experiences of worry, anxiety, fear. Because it's rejecting them that they grow, that they become monsters, and that our wheel sinks deeper within that by its rejection. We push against it so far that it grows around us. But if we accept where we are when we are, we become more buoyant. We become more flexible. And to do that, we may want to express it, both to ourselves, this is where I am, this is who I am, this is what's happening right now. And it's only right, and it's just right now. And there's help for me. I can express that to myself, that there is help for me. I don't have to do this alone. And I'm open to letting other people know where I am, who I am right now. And that is, I'm not projecting this on you. That this is right me, that is me. This is right me right now. This is me right now. I think that's where this spread is moving us to. And it's in that being able to express to ourselves who we are right now as we move through the cycles of our experience of our lives. I think that helps keep us open to the powerful flow of intention and our ability to live intentionally. Does that make sense? I think we've worked our way through this, and I think the message has revealed itself for us right here, right now. I think so. What do you think? Is there another direction you think that, especially this last question, could take? Another answer from these two cards? I'd love to hear from you. So friends, we're at the end of the video, almost. And I'd like to remind you to do the things, as they say, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. If you haven't subscribed, and hit the alarm bell so you get notification of when I upload videos. I usually do at least 2 a week. I'll be doing more in July, and I'll be talking about that a little bit later. Share this. You can toss the link to this video on other platforms if you like. Get it out there to people who might be interested in this. And comment below. I would really love to hear from you. I would really. Oh, and if you're interested in a reading from me, hey, I've got my Instagram account linked at the bottom here. Go over to Instagram and you can send me a direct message and we can work out a way for you to get a reading from me. And friends, now, oh, and just a moment, there will be information about these decks. Remember, this is our last chance to see these decks together for quite a while. So check out these decks. And friends, now, as always, I wish you love, joy, well-being, and pure awareness. Thank you.